Szanowni Państwo, dziś polecam książkę absolutnie wyjątkową Biała Armia Antona Denikina. Po raz pierwszy zresztą wydana w Polsce przez wydawnictwo Derezio. To nie tylko fascynująca opowieść o heroicznych zmaganiach rosyjskich ochotników przeciwko bolszewikom, ale też bezcenne źródło historyczne stworzone przez jednego z najważniejszych świadków tamtej epoki. To książka, która wciąga, porusza i pozwala zrozumieć dramatyczny wymiar walki z rodzącym się komunizmem. Link do tej i innych książek znajdziecie w opisie dzisiejszego programu. Polecam bardzo serdecznie. Dr Michał Krupa.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Mike Krupa here for DR Global, the English language podcast of Poland's largest conservative weekly, Do Rzeczy. It is November. I'm still a month back. It's actually December 10th, 2025. I'd like to welcome you guys on episode 11 of DR Global. Today we have another fantastic guest. But before I tell a little bit about him, remember, guys, to like and subscribe our channel. It definitely helps us grow. Remember also, if you can, to support us via Buy Me Coffee. The link is in the description box. Remember also about our patron, Derezio Publishing House. That's for our Polish language readers. The link to Derezio is in the description box. Remember, Christmas is coming up. There's a ton of books you can get from Derezio, spiritual, philosophical, historical, the ones that I always like to talk about before we begin our program. So make sure to check Derezio to our Polish readers. You'll find something there for Christmas, and not only for your soul and for your intellect. And ladies and gentlemen, today we once again have another fantastic guest, Professor Ivan Katchanovski, all the way from Canada. Professor Ivan Katchanovski teaches at the School of Political Studies and Conflict Studies and Human Rights program at the University of Ottawa. Professor Katchanovski specializes primarily in researching politics and conflicts in Ukraine. His academic publications include 7 books, 2 of which I highly recommend. One about the Maidan snipers massacre, and the other also about the origins of the war in Ukraine. You will find the links to both of these books, which are, by the way, downloadable thanks to the help of many of Professor Katchanovski's supporters, free online, so you will get those links in the description box. And again, we are very happy to have Professor Katchanovski with us today. Professor Katchanovski, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing, I think, very well. And thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure to join your program. And I actually understand Polish, and I can read in Polish because my mother and my ancestors, they live in Poland. I have relatives living in Poland for a long time, and for centuries. So I also kind of have a pleasure to join this program and discuss my research based on my academic research. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Also, it's going to be an English language discussion then between 2 Slavs, which will be interesting, I think. Professor Katchanovski, I want to start off with the current state of the negotiations regarding Ukraine. We've heard in the last couple of days that the 28-point peace plan supposedly has been limited to a 20-point peace plan, which Zelensky has stated in recent days has been reduced to 20 points because in the original 28-point peace plan, there were things that are supposedly unacceptable to Ukraine, especially when it comes to land concessions to Russia. I would like you to give your assessment of where we are in the negotiations currently, because we've also heard in the last couple of days that Trump wants an agreement by Christmas, by December 25th. That was apparently made clear to Zelensky in a phone call. What's your assessment? Where are we going with these negotiations?
I can say that based on publicly available information from different sources and based on my own research, there is now real possibility to end this war in Ukraine, which has devastating consequences to Ukraine and Ukrainians, and which also affected many other countries, including Poland. this again very soon. So there is such a real possibility to end this war and to have a peace deal very soon. But there are still important disagreements between, specifically between Zelensky and Trump and Russia and Putin on conditions, on specific conditions of such a peace deal. And this information suggests that Zelensky refuses to accept demands by Russia and by the United States to withdraw Ukrainian forces from Donetsk region, which is part of a region which is controlled by Ukrainian forces. And this is a key Russian demand to end this war. Another issues which include, security guarantees to Ukraine. Zelensky wants to have a NATO-like security guarantees to Ukraine, but the United States and other Western countries are not likely to issue such security guarantees to Ukraine because this would mean a war, direct war between Russia and NATO and the United States and other countries which are members of NATO. So in this case, I think there are still important disagreements and leverage of Trump on Russia is very limited, but Trump has a leverage over Zelensky. So if Trump would use such a leverage against Zelensky, he would be able to, to reach such a peace deal and this depends basically on Donald Trump and his policy and his use of his leverage against Zelensky.
What do you say, Professor, to those? Because, for example, I think it might have been Professor Mearsheimer who hinted at this and others that there are sort of two factions in the Trump administration. So you have sort of the deep state, the entrenched state that is sort of colluding with the Europeans in maintaining this war and, quote unquote, supporting Ukraine. And then you have the sort of, the realists in the positions of the vice president. For example, U.S. Army Secretary Driscoll, who was in Kiev, and a few other members of the administration who say, no, the time to end the war is now, and we should be looking towards some sort of modus vivendi, if not partnership outright, with Russia. What do you make of such claims?
Yes, there are clear indications of existence of two different factions in the Trump administration and broadly in the Republican Party in the United States. And one faction, which is, basically wants to prolong this war, which is not only war between Russia and Ukraine, but also a proxy war between NATO and Russia in Ukraine. This faction tries to block a peace deal by using a variety of claims which they claim that Ukraine is able to defeat Russia, that Ukraine would win this war, or there would be a stalemate between Russia and Ukraine, or that Russia can be sanctioned and Russia would fall or collapse because of economic pressure. And they justify this by using claims that they support actually Ukraine. But this is not supporting Ukraine. They actually support Zelensky and his policy which basically means also using Ukraine as a proxy by the West to weaken Russia. And this is, this policy and this prolongation of this war and refusal to accept a peace deal, which is, would be best option out of bad options which Ukraine has now and had since the start of Russian invasion. So this means that this kind of policy of prolonging war has negative consequences, devastating consequences to Ukraine and Ukrainians. But they claim that this is actually supporting Ukraine. There is no support of Ukraine. This is actually, I regard this as the opposite. This is opposite from supporting Ukraine. This is basically using Ukraine and fighting to the last Ukrainian against Russia for geopolitical reasons, which is in a war which is not winnable for Ukraine because Russia has military advantage over Ukraine and Russia cannot be basically defeated because Russia can always use nuclear weapons in a very unlikely case if Ukraine were to be able to take back Crimea or trying to take back Crimea and try to defeat Russia. But this is not likely. This is close to zero because of currently Russia is winning this war, and the issue is if Ukraine would sign a peace deal on such terms, which is again would be better compared to alternatives, which include capitulation of Ukraine in case if the war would continue, because Ukraine would not be able to resist Russia for a long time if the United States would stop supplying of military weapons, would provide military support in terms of providing weapons and military intelligence to Ukraine. Now indirectly they supply weapons indirectly via European Union and the United Kingdom and other countries. And a faction which is often criticized as basically offering capitulation of Ukraine actually is, I regard them as a policy which is based on evidence, based on reality. This is concession to reality. This is not concession to Russia, to Putin. This is basically concession to reality, to accept a peace deal on the terms which would be again which would have better option to Ukraine compared to other alternatives, because Ukraine is not able to dictate peace deal terms to Russia or to the United States, since Ukraine is weaker in militarily, it's weaker politically, and it faces defeat from Russia. So the faction which supports a peace deal, including specifically Witkoff and U.S. Vice President Vance, they are actually offering alternative which would be better for Ukraine and for Ukrainians in the long run compared to alternatives, which would be again defeat of Ukraine and a peace deal. Future peace deal would be on much more negative terms to Ukraine compared to what is possible now. And Zelensky again, but for Zelensky, this is not going to be best option, because he staked all his power, all his policies were based basically on using this war to stay in power and to try to kind of get this cheap publicity and cheap applause, basically, and ovations from the West, from the Western media, from the Western politicians, with devastating consequences to Ukraine. So in case of any peace deal on such terms, Zelensky would lose his power, and he might even lose his freedom, and there is also danger even to his life in such a case.
Indeed. I mean, we remember the threats made to him by Dmitry Yarosh back in 2019 when he was elected. Also, there were statements recently by members of the Azov battalion, I believe, that if he were to concede anything to the Russians, well, he might end up dead. So I'm pretty sure he's feeling the breath of what I would call, the Bandera faction on his neck, so to say. But Professor, before I go to your book, which I think is very important, on the Maidan massacre, I just want to get your insight also on the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church tied to the Moscow Patriarchate, because we know that's become a very contentious issue, but not very contentious in Western mainstream media. As a matter of fact, apart from, I think the reporting done by Tucker Carlson, nobody is talking about the fact that Zelensky seems to be wiping out a very substantial portion of Ukrainian Christianity. You've studied the region, you hail from the region, you know the region very well and the religious dynamic. Why the indifference in the West and in general in the world to basically, the erasure of the core spiritual tradition of Ukraine?
I think this is there is clear evidence that there is a political persecution of this church, Orthodox Church, which is largest church in Ukraine, based on a number of people who actually attend church services. And the base of this church is not in the eastern part of Ukraine, not in Donbass, not in Crimea, which is now annexed by Russia, but it is actually the base and most important kind of membership of this church is in Western Ukraine, including my native region of Volhynia. So Volhynia, Rivne region, and also central Ukraine, such regions as Kherson, Khmelnytsky, and Vinnytsia, and so on. So there are a lot of people actually who attended this church who have no pro-Russian attitudes. They are not in any way linked to Russia, and the current campaign to persecute this church, to arrest many leaders of this church, and to specifically also to kind of a policy to have a forced mobilization of clergy from this church in contrast to all other denominations, religious denominations in Ukraine, is a case of political persecution, which is not reported by the media and totally ignored by these exceptions that you mentioned. And this is also totally ignored and omitted and even de facto supported by the European Union, which is supposed to, again, promote religious freedom and rights of people to exercise their freedom of religion. And also in the United States, many Republicans and many Democrats supported this persecution of the largest Orthodox Church in Ukraine for political reasons, because this would weaken Russia, because of religious past historical ties between this church and the Russian Orthodox Church. Even so, Ukrainian Orthodox Church publicly renounced any ties with Russia, religious ties and other ties with Russia after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This is again this was dismissed, and this was not reported by the media and by governments, and this is, I think, would have also negative consequences for Ukrainians. And this is just one example. Such political persecution of Orthodox Church in Ukraine is one example of situation when Ukraine is not democracy. So the regime of Zelensky is not a democracy. He's not a liberal Democrat. He actually tries to, and he already basically de facto installed a dictatorship in Ukraine and suppresses human rights and civic freedoms of Ukrainians. And this is just another kind of manifestation of such undemocratic and illiberal policies of Zelensky, which have nothing to do with European values and support for democracy and freedom, which is often used by the West, by the Western media and Western politicians to claim that this is what Zelensky is fighting for. This is not the case, actually. This is opposite. And I mentioned this also in my book, which I published recently, The Russia-Ukraine War and Its Origins, in which I also discuss these issues and this persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church.
Indeed. And as was mentioned, you can find that book. It's in the description box. It's actually accessible for free thanks to the generous contributions to Professor Katchanovski's work. So everybody make sure to get that book, read it. A very important primer on the reasons why we are where we are. But Professor, I'd like to go back to your earlier book about the Maidan. The overriding narrative, unfortunately, still in Poland, is the one that is, supposedly the real one, that in February 2014, it was the Berkut, the Yanukovych forces that started firing on the protesters on the Maidan Square that, prompted the Ukrainians to rebel and to punish the regime that was shooting at them. But your book is such a meticulous piece of research that anybody who hasn't read your book and claims to speak competently on the Maidan, I think, would making himself a laughingstock. I think your book is a primer. If you could just give sort of the basic elements of your thesis on what exactly took place in February 2014 on the Maidan.
Yes, I think this is a crucial issue because the Maidan massacre in Ukraine was a trigger point, basically a point which started all these conflicts within Ukraine and between Russia and Ukraine and between the West and Russia. And when these conflicts become violent within Ukraine. So this is a very important case of political violence, which I examine in my peer-reviewed journal articles. I publish now 4 peer-reviewed journal articles, 1 book chapter, and I have a book which you mentioned, which is open access, freely available, which is also published by major Western academic press after peer reviews, after very positive peer reviews, and which presents comprehensive study of the Maidan massacre in Ukraine. So I examine all the evidence which is publicly available, including revelations from the Maidan massacre trial and investigation in Ukraine, which were not reported by the Western media, which were often omitted by specifically omitted or misrepresented, including even Maidan massacre trial verdict, which was issued after this trial in Ukraine, which was issued by a Ukrainian court in 2023 after a very long trial. And this also basically also attempt to censor such information. And there was a very interesting case when I gave interview to Polish kind of a portal on net, in October of 2000, in the fall of 2014, after I first presented my first draft of my study, Maidan massacre study, at a Ukrainian studies seminar, and this became viral, and a lot of attention was kind of produced because of this research, because of my study, which showed that this was fourth flag massacre involving far-right elements and oligarchic elements of Maidan opposition. So I gave interview to I gave first interview to Onet. Onet published this results of my study, and after I was invited to do a long interview to Onet, which also was initially posted on Onet, but afterwards I was told that they removed this interview about my Maidan massacre study after a request from the Polish government. So, because of Ukrainian ambassador in Poland requested this interview to be removed, and they contacted Polish government, and this interview was removed by Onet. So this is just one example when people do not get information based on academic research, which is again now become just evidence became overwhelming evidence, because the evidence which I presented in my study includes videos of Maidan massacre. I synchronized all the videos, publicly available videos of this massacre, and this video show Maidan snipers from far right, specifically from far right group, which is led by, was linked by to the right sector and to Svoboda party in Ukraine. Shooting into direction of Maidan activists, shooting also in direction of police. And this also shows Maidan snipers who were located in Maidan control hotel Ukraina. This video also shows that this hotel and other locations in which Maidan snipers shot Maidan activists and police was located in the territory which was controlled by Maidan opposition, and that this territory, this building in particular, Hotel Ukraina, was controlled by Maidan forces, including specifically Svoboda party, at the time when snipers shot Maidan activists from this location, including from hotel rooms which were occupied by deputies from far-right Svoboda party in Ukraine. So this is just video evidence of such snipers, which was initially denied and now even still denied now as a conspiracy theory. They claim that there were no such snipers, or this is just conspiracy theory, and so on. You have videos of shooting of Maidan activists, and even in my video appendix I included a video from Polish TV channel, which I included this was live broadcast by a Polish correspondent from Maidan Square, from Maidan massacre. And he said that at the start of the Maidan massacre, he said there was sniper shooting both Maidan activists and police. So this is, and he was reporting from just in front of Hotel Ukraina when this massacre started. So this is just one evidence which I included. I included also other Polish media reports about snipers, including from TVP, television channel, from other Polish journalists, including, again, also Ukrainian and other foreign journalists. I included them in my video appendixes, which show that there were snipers located in other buildings which were controlled by Maidan opposition, and these snipers were shooting both Maidan activists and police. So this is just video evidence, and videos which are synchronized also show that the times and locations and directions of shooting by the police, by Berkut members who were charged with this massacre and who were blamed for the massacre, actually did not coincide with specific times and directions and locations in which Maidan activists were shot. So this means they could not physically shoot these activists because they were not shooting at the time. They did not aim the Kalashnikovs in their direction, or they were shooting above or in front of Maidan activists. In a few cases when Maidan activists were shot and killed or wounded in this area. So this is clear evidence which is also publicly available, and this is not only just my synchronization. You have other synchronization which was done independently by other organizations, and they produce the same results, but they did not show this. So they did this using very tiny screens, and synchronization of videos is not possible to see actually when police is shooting and when Maidan activists are killed. So another evidence includes testimonies of absolute majority of wounded Maidan activists who were shot and wounded during the Maidan massacre. Most of them, absolute majority of them, testified that they were shot from locations which were controlled by Maidan opposition, specifically Hotel Ukraina and other locations, which I mentioned. And they also testified that they saw snipers in these locations, contrary to denial of existence of such snipers by official investigation. Investigation in Ukraine denied that there were any snipers located in Hotel Ukraina. Even so, you have testimonies of absolute majority of Maidan activists who testified about this. And even Prosecutor General Office of Ukraine admitted publicly that about half of wounded Maidan activists were shot from locations which were not controlled by Berkut special police forces or other government units. And they said they were shot from other locations, which means from other sectors, which means Maidan controlled sectors, which I identified in my study, but they did not charge anybody with their shooting. So you have, now more than half of Maidan activists who were wounded on February 20th, 2014 are not. There is nobody who is charged with their wounding or their shooting and attempt to kill them during Maidan massacre. So this is a clear admission, even by official investigation, which publicly denies any evidence of Maidan snipers in Hotel Ukraina and other locations. They admitted basically that there were such snipers and who shot Maidan activists from locations which were not controlled by government forces. In addition to this, I also included testimonies of several hundred eyewitnesses and other witnesses who reported snipers in Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control locations who saw such snipers, many of them also testified that these snipers were members of Maidan opposition, or specifically from the group which was linked to far-right sector, which was created by and led by an organization called Trizup or Trident, named after Stepan Bandera, and Svoboda Party, which was originally called Social National Party after Nazi Party in Germany. So, and there are also admissions by 14 members of Maidan sniper groups who testified publicly in media or social media that they, or even to Maidan massacre trial and investigation, that they and other members of Maidan sniper groups shot police during the Maidan massacre, or that they shot also Maidan activists during the massacre. This was testimonies by Georgian snipers who admitted that they and other members of far-right, other members of Maidan opposition, including from this far-right link group, were Maidan snipers who shot both Maidan activists and police. And in addition to this, there is also forensic evidence that shows that Maidan activists were shot from very steep directions based on medical examinations of bodies of Maidan activists who were shot. The direction of bullets, of their bullet wounds, is very steep. At the time when Maidan activists were on the ground, and at the time when the police was in front of them, so on the same ground level or similar ground level. So this means this direction of the shots, gunshots and wounds in the bodies of Maidan activists would coincide with locations of Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control buildings, which were from the left and right side and in the back of Maidan activists, and almost all wounds of Maidan activists were from the same direction, from the back or from the left and right side, and not from the front, straight from the front or horizontal level. There are a few exceptions, but at the time when these protesters were again turning their back to police and trying to run away from this massacre site. And there are like videos, including videos which I included. This is consistent with videos, including Belgian television video, which shows that Maidan activists noticed that they are shot from locations from Hotel Ukraina, and they asked snipers not to shoot at them. There is also BBC video, which shows Maidan sniper shooting into both Maidan activists and BBC journalists, and trying to again kill or shoot and wound them, and they flee after they noticed sniper from this Hotel Ukraina. And this sniper was identified by BBC journalists as a sniper who wear a helmet which is similar to helmet which was worn by Maidan activists. And official investigation revealed in 2015 that this sniper was shooting from a hotel room which was occupied by one of the leaders of Svoboda Party, far-right Svoboda Party in Hotel Ukraina. So this is again another evidence this which links this party and far-right and Maidan snipers to the massacre. And there is also video, Ukrainian television video, which shows the sniper shooting from the same exactly hotel room, and you see a kind of a weapon, and you see discharge of gases like kind of after shooting from this location. And Ukrainian television journalist shows that this sniper was shooting in the back Maidan activists. So this is again clear evidence, but then prosecution says that there were no snipers, and they even denied that there were snipers in this location now. In addition to this evidence, there is also ballistic examinations which were conducted in some of the cases by government forensic experts, and this ballistic examination showed that Maidan activists were shot from direction which points to Hotel Ukraina and to other locations like Bank Arkada and Ozhopnevi Palace, which are controlled by Maidan opposition. So this is a forensic examinations by government experts, ballistic experts, which correspond to what I found in my study. But this was done only in some of the cases of wounded and killed Maidan activists. And after Ukrainian trial specifically asked prosecution to conduct such examinations in all cases of wounded and killed Maidan activists, prosecution basically refused to do this. And this was revealed at the Maidan massacre trial, that they stopped doing this examinations using ballistic experts after first such examinations pointed to not to Berkut position in front of Maidan activists, but pointed to the back, to Hotel Ukraina and Music Conservatory. So they basically, prosecution did not use ballistic experts to determine locations of shooters. Even so, this is a standard way to do this, and which is because, and this is kind of, I say this is dogs that did not bark, because obviously this would be key evidence, and they did not do this now for almost 12 years since this massacre took place. In addition to this, also initial ballistic examinations of bullets did not match bullets from bodies of Maidan activists to bullets from Berkut police members who were charged with this massacre. And this is, I think, key evidence, which also consistent with all other evidence which I mentioned. And even bullet holes, which I examined on the site of Maidan massacre in Tis and other locations, also point to shooting from the back into Maidan activists, which also can be seen in videos and consistent with testimonies of Maidan activists. And finally, Maidan massacre trial verdict, which was issued after several years of a trial, which I examined in my studies and in my book, also officially admitted that many Maidan activists were shot and killed and wounded from Hotel Ukraina, which was controlled, according to, again, official text of this verdict, which was controlled by Maidan opposition. And they also stated that BBC journalists were shot and again shot at by Maidan activists from Hotel Ukraina, which was occupied by Maidan activists at the time. And they mentioned this far-right link Maidan company of snipers being in Hotel Ukraina in Music Conservatory at the time of Maidan massacre. And this is, I think, crucial evidence. In addition to this verdict also stated publicly that there was no order issued by Yanukovych. There was no evidence whatsoever of such order issued by Yanukovych or any other government officials or commanders at the time of Maidan massacre. Commanders of Berkut and other, or before the Maidan massacre or during the Maidan massacre. And they also stated there was no involvement of Russian agents in this massacre, specifically direct involvement in this massacre by Russian agents. So this means, again, official admission, what I also found in my academic studies. But not a single media outlet in Ukraine reported this part of verdict of Ukrainian trial, and not basically, and with just few exceptions, Western media also did not report this part of a verdict. They stated instead that either all Maidan activists were shot by Berkut, kind of saying that the Maidan massacre trial confirms that all Maidan activists were shot and killed by Berkut, or they claimed, some of them claimed that 38 of Maidan activists were killed by Berkut, and in a few other cases, it was not clear 40 Maidan activists were killed by Berkut members who kind of, and in 8 cases, it's not just clear, there is lack of evidence, which just because of lack of evidence, Maidan kind of activists were killed, but verdict stated that they could not determine their location. But in fact, Maidan verdict specifically states that specific Maidan activists were killed from Hotel Ukraina, from the action of Hotel Ukraina, which means from top floors of Hotel Ukraina, which again, like this is nobody can be between top floors of Hotel Ukraina in the air, flying and kind of shooting into Maidan activists. So this means, again, this is official admission that these activists were killed from Hotel Ukraina because they were killed from top floors, from a very steep direction, which is what I found also in my studies. Basically, Maidan verdict confirmed a lot key points of my Maidan massacre studies, which were again, but they were not reported. These revelations were not reported by the media and ignored and still kind of dismissed by many kind of self-proclaimed experts and media kind of outlets and politicians and government officials. But Maidan massacre trial verdict convicted Berkut for shooting and killing 34 Berkut police members, Maidan activists, out of 48 Maidan activists who were killed, and with whose murder Berkut police members were charged with. But this conviction is based on one forensic examination of bullets, which was conducted in 2019, after 5 years after Maidan massacre took place, and this forensic examination matched bullets from Berkut Kalashnikovs to bullets from bodies of Maidan activists. But this forensic examination, which was conducted again 5 years after massacre, overturned several dozen previous ballistic examinations, including by the same experts, which did not do this. So they basically changed the results of forensic examinations of bullets without any explanation why this happened. And this is including the examination which was conducted by automatic system, which did not match bullets to Berkut Kalashnikovs. So, and this is also that's why I say this is very clear, because in specific cases in which Maidan activists were linked by the verdict to kind of Berkut police, you can see in videos which I examined and synchronized, which also mentioned in Maidan massacre trial, that the police were not shooting at the same time when these activists were killed, but you can see gunshots from different locations by their sound, which was different from sound of Kalashnikov gunshots from police members who were shooting into the direction of Maidan snipers in Hotel Ukraina. So they were shooting in the floors of Hotel Ukraina, second floor and above the height of Maidan activists who were in front of them, and were killed by the snipers from Hotel Ukraina and other locations controlled by Maidan opposition. And this is also basically Maidan massacre trial also omitted and dismissed testimonies of wounded Maidan activists because they say because many of them changed their testimony during Maidan massacre trial. Again, without any explanation, several years after Maidan massacre, they claimed that they were shot by Berkut and so on, and changed their testimony, which they gave to investigation right after the Maidan massacre, in which they said that they were shot from Hotel Ukraina and other Maidan control locations. And also, again, this conviction of just 2 members in absentia, this again was politically motivated because Zelensky government exchanged these 2 police members from Berkut to Donbas separatists in 2019, shortly after election of Zelensky, and so this means that nobody is convicted now and serves real prison term for the Maidan massacre, because this conviction was done in absentia, and now there is Court of Appeals in Ukraine examines this case again. But because of justice in Ukraine and the judiciary system in Ukraine is not independent, so this this means any decision by court in Ukraine would be politically motivated, as with this conviction of 2 Berkut members in absentia for Maidan massacre. And even they just court verdict use such kind of logic that when there was no evidence that police shot kind of Maidan activists, and when Maidan activists testified they were shot from location, like which was controlled by Maidan opposition, like Hotel Ukraina, and when ballistic examinations and medical examinations showed that these activists were shot from top and steep direction, from the back and from the side, which matches Maidan locations. This verdict stated that they were still shot by Berkut simply because they were shot in the area in which kind of other activists were shot, according to verdict by Berkut police, based on this single ballistic examination, which matched bullets kind of from Berkut to Maidan activists. Even so, you can see, I showed this in my studies, in my book, that at the time when the Berkut police were shooting, kind of there were no activists who would fall to the ground, and you can see kind of a bullet hitting like Hotel Ukraina windows and walls and like in front of the Maidan activists, but there were no kind of specific kind of cases, with few exceptions, which is you can see there were 2 gunshots with very different sound, so it's not possible to determine who actually shot them, but definitely, but there is no such evidence. And so you see one, for instance, Maidan activist who was wounded. He was wounded and he pointed to Hotel Ukraina as he was shot. Ballistic expert pointed that he was shot from Hotel Ukraina, and there is an X-ray of his bullet wound, which shows that he was shot from a steep direction. Bullet came from a steep direction, and there is also kind of a chair which he held to protect himself from Hotel Ukraina. There is also very steep direction of a bullet hole kind of in this chair. You can see also, and at the same time, a video shows that Maidan activist, when this Maidan activist was shot and wounded, police member who was charged with his wounding actually was sitting behind a Berkut barricade and pointing his Kalashnikov in the air. So he was not even shooting this, and this is kind of this was just omitted by the trial. So this is, I think, clear evidence that this was a massacre which was conducted by members and elements of Maidan opposition, and specifically from far-right organizations linked to Right Sector and Svoboda, and oligarchic parties like Fazlan Party, which led Maidan opposition at the time, and that this was specifically done to overthrow Yanukovych government by falsely blaming him for this massacre.
Wow. What a meticulous rundown, Professor. But I think that was important because it's such a, as you said, falsified, narrative that we're dealing with here. It sort of reminds me of the single bullet theory in the Kennedy case, when there's so many contradictions, and yet so many researchers have pointed out, for example, that, well, the one-man shooter theory doesn't really hold up. Well, I think you've done things, you've condensed the evidence in such short period of time, and I've read your book. I've seen how precise you get into the details. I highly recommend it to, as I said, all our viewers. And it's interesting that the Ukrainian ambassador in Poland told the Polish government to tell Onet to not speak to a Ukrainian living in Canada about the situation that occurred in Ukraine. It's pretty crazy in that regard, but these are the crazy times that we're in. Professor, we're just out of time, but hopefully I will pick your brain in an interview in sometime in the future. I think what you presented today is very important for our Polish audience and our international audience. As I said, I encourage everybody to read Professor Katchanovski's books, which you'll find in the description box, the two especially on the described Maidan massacre and on the origins of the Ukrainian-Russia war. And we'll also have Professor Katchanovski's handle also in the description box. But for today, Professor Katchanovski, dziękuję, diakuyu. Thank you very much for your insights, and hopefully we'll have you back on DR Global soon to discuss more issues.
Yes, thank you, and dziękuję bardzo. This was again a good opportunity to present my research, academic research, to Polish audience, and my book about Maidan massacre is already translated into German. And this also in Czech language, and this also Italian translation being currently done, and other translations in other languages. So hopefully it might be also translated in Polish This book is freely available for anybody to read and translate and republish in any language. And this book already received, just on publisher website, it's received kind of 750,000 views and downloads just on publisher website, which is quite unprecedented for academic studies. So this is why kind of I'm trying to block to kind of go against this censorship and misrepresentation of Maidan massacre, and so because of importance of this case of violence. So thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you, Professor.
You too. Thank you.